Hi there again, John Wilkinson and History Made Easier. This second video looking at Italy's involvement in World War II will cover the Italian campaign in Greece, its campaign in North Africa, and the impact of those campaigns on Italy itself, but also on Hitler's Nazi Germany. Italy invades Greece. On October the 28th, 1940, the anniversary of the March on Rome that had put Mussolini in power, Italy invaded Greece. Hitler had warned against any new ventures, but Mussolini declared to Ciano that he would resign as an Italian if the Greeks weren't defeated quickly. He also thought Hitler was jealous at the thought of an Italian victory. But the planning was woeful. No consideration had been made for the autumn rains, the mountain terrain and the poor roads, nor for the fact that the Italian ports were chaotic and Albania lacked ports large enough to supply such a large army. There was also an underestimation of the Greek strength as well as their determination. It all led to a disastrous campaign for the Italians, and by mid-November, Italian troops had been pushed back into Albania. By December, it would be up to the Germans to bail the Italians out. What the Italians asked from the Germans showed how little they had been prepared for war. Everything from anti-aircraft guns and tanks to rolls of barbed wire and sandbags. They could have added decent boots, probably. Here was the first indication that Italy would be a millstone, not an aid to the German war effort. The cost for Italy, apart from the humiliation of the fascist regime in the eyes of the Germans, was 100,000 men. The cost for Hitler was that he had to divert a force some 700,000 strong to bail Italy out, just when he wanted to concentrate everything on his plans to invade the Soviet Union. And by the way, the Germans took Greece in just 3 weeks. Meanwhile, Italy's fleet suffered 2 blows from which it never recovered. First, a British aerial torpedo attack put half of Italy's battle fleet out of action, with 3 battleships sunk whilst lying in anchor, unprotected in Taranto harbour in southern Italy. Then 5 warships were lost in an engagement with the British off Greece. The Italian fleet would not venture out of port much after that. The war in North Africa. Things went badly in North Africa too, as the British took Italy's entire empire. In Libya, 2/3 of Italy's troops were lost, dead or captured in just 3 months of fighting between December 1940 and February 1941. They would recover some of the lost territory, though again only with German help, this time taking 300,000 German troops, but would lose it again as Germany's war effort came unstuck. In Fascist Voices, Christopher Duggan uses the diary of a young man who, having been born in 1915, had grown up in Mussolini's fascist Italy. He fought against the French and he fought in Albania, quickly becoming alarmed at the difference between the rhetoric of the fascist regime and the reality he was experiencing firsthand. All those speeches about greatness, he wrote, and a longing for expansion, all that desire to make the Italians and the world believe that we are strong and invincible, all those things that put together signify pride. Yet in my view, this pride has, without knowing it, chosen to come and dig its grave right here in the middle of these wild and savage mountains of Albania. And hearing of the disastrous news coming from the fighting in Africa, he wrote, "Our place in the sun is being occupied by others, and we are returning to the shade." And in this way, all that arrogant posturing that marked the pre-war years is evaporating. All that mania for greatness, that mad desire to demonstrate to the world that Italy is a strong and powerful country. We are now being put to the test, and events are showing what in fact we are capable of. These are not the words of an anti-fascist, but a disappointed and painfully honest Italian. The Italian home front. Things were just as bad on the home front. Morale was not helped when at the end of 1941 the fascist regime declared that it was at war with America, long the preferred choice for emigration for millions of Italians. And by the end of 1942, British air raids were taking their toll. Some 25,000 homes destroyed in Turin, and 500,000 people having fled Milan. But it would be the southern ports, Naples, Taranto, Palermo, Messina and Catania, that would suffer the worst of the bombing. Between June 1940 and September 1943, more than 18,000 civilians had been killed. And between then and 1945, more than another 45,000 would be killed. By then, the Americans were bombing Italian cities as well as the British. There were shortages of food and things like medicines, soap and shoes, as well as fuel for heating. Without quinine supplies, malaria returned, and without soap, scabies was rife in schools and rural villages. Though the government tried to avoid it, to keep up the pretense that there were no shortages, rationing had to be introduced in October 1941. It wasn't long before those in the cities were surviving on little more than around 1,000 calories a day. Morale plummeted, and fascist propaganda only seemed to make things worse, as the lies only amplified the reality. The Italians blamed the fascist regime for not protecting them. Yet it took a long time before bitter complaints led to protest. Anti-government slogans were painted onto walls. One was particularly poignant. "You have taken our iron, our copper and our rings. Now you are taking our sons." There was also a refusal to buy one of the Italian stamps that had Mussolini and Hitler on it. "They are even forcing us to lick his backside," was one joke. But the regime could live with this. From 1943 onwards, however, few thought that Italy was winning, and complaints had manifested into action. Mussolini increasingly came to be blamed too, at least in the cities. This had begun in the second half of 1942 and increased throughout 1943. Strikes grew in number, and in Turin in March 1943, 100,000 workers went on strike. But mostly it was a strange mood. Embarrassment, even shame at being taken in by fascism. Yet still, on the whole, unwilling to come out and share these feelings openly. There was a loss of faith. Italians no longer believed in fascism, and increasingly didn't believe in Mussolini either. When Germany's fortunes turned for the worse, deep inside the Soviet Union, the game was really well and truly up for Italian fascism. The price to be paid. In July 1943, with the Germans being pushed back in the Soviet Union, British and American forces landed in Sicily. Mussolini was crumbling faster than Italian resistance to the invasion. He seemed a shadow of the man that had won Abyssinia for Italy. He suffered from stomach pains, the result of an ulcer, and he suffered from insomnia too. 2 weeks after the invasion of Sicily, Mussolini was removed from power, arrested and sent to the island of Ponza. The country was told that he had resigned. In Rome, the news was met by cheering and singing. Pictures of Mussolini were thrown into the street. Party badges and insignia were torn off clothes and tossed to the floor. Such scenes were repeated in towns and cities across the country. One would have been hard-pressed to find a fascist in the days that followed. Italy, with what passed as a government in utter disarray, negotiated their surrender with the Allies, whilst trying to hide that they were doing so from the Germans. They surrendered unconditionally to the Allies on September the 8th. But fascist Italy was saved by the Germans, who seized control of Rome on September the 11th, Victor Emmanuel having fled the capital. And on September the 12th, Mussolini was rescued from captivity. The Germans set up the Italian Social Republic, otherwise known as the Republic of Salo, after the small town on Lake Garda where it was based. It was headed by Mussolini, but really he was now nothing more than the Germans' puppet. Meanwhile, Victor Emmanuel set up the Kingdom of the South, with the Allies occupying southern Italy and the Germans occupying the north and central Italy. For the next 18 months, whilst the Allies fought the Germans for Italian soil, Italian fascists and the fast-growing resistance movement fought each other in what was a civil war. As the Allies pushed northwards and the Germans retreated, members of the resistance caught Mussolini trying to flee Italy, disguised as a soldier. He was taken and later shot. His body was then taken to Milan, where it was hung upside down from the roof of a petrol station in a Milanese piazza. So, Mussolini, who had stood at the peak of his power in 1936 with the victory in Abyssinia, saw it slip away as he tied Italy ever closer to Hitler's Nazi Germany. And as World War II turned against Germany, so it turned against Italy and Mussolini. Hi there again, John Wilkinson and History Made Easier. This second video looking at Italy's involvement in World War II will cover the Italian campaign in Greece, its campaign in North Africa, and the impact of those campaigns on Italy itself, but also on Hitler's Nazi Germany.